they sent in the shock troops, Sardar shock troops, to physically throw out any moderate Sikhs.
Okay.
If you could please post this tribute to the editor of Global Times. We thank you for being such a devoted raw agent. For you to have set China on the path of doom in 1989. Boss, I'm telling you, this Gurpatwant Singh Pannu is an Indian agent. I'm telling you, he's a raw agent.
Okay.
But now, because Pakistani bhikari ho gaye hain, the Sikhs are like, why the hell do we need to go through you?
The following is a conversation with the great and powerful Abhijit Iyer Mitra, who is a senior fellow at the ORF, and he is a very important and noted defense and geopolitical analyst. It's his second appearance, or third appearance, I would say, on the Abhijit Chawda podcast. And we discuss a wide range of issues of global and national importance from the perspective of the Indian foreign policy and geopolitics. So enjoy the conversation and don't forget to like and subscribe. Abhijit Iyer Mitra, welcome back to the podcast. It's such a pleasure to have you again.
Thank you so much, Abhijit Chawda. It's so lovely to be on a podcast with a fellow Abhijit.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's lots of interesting things that's happening in the world. Let's begin with l'affaire Trudeau, Canada.
Oui.
Shall we? So what do you make of the entire thing? The last 2-3 weeks, what's happening? I mean, the guy comes to India for the G20, apparently high on God knows what. He disappears for a couple of days, doesn't attend the dinner, and then he levels allegations, and then he has gotten embroiled in more and more controversies. What do you make of this whole thing?
Okay. To be fair, I think the rumors of him being, the credible rumors of him being high are quite credible because, I got called into the CISF office to be shown the credible rumors.
Okay.
And I inspected the evidence of the credible rumors and it was very convincing.
Okay.
I mean, it wasn't very specific. I didn't see much, but it was very convincing. So I can confirm that the rumors are indeed very credible.
Okay.
Now, let me tell you what I think happened. There is no such thing as the Khalistan movement right now. It exists up here. Okay. People who grew up like we did in the 80s and 90s who remember what that horror was.
Yes.
There is no insurgency happening in Punjab right now.
Yes.
There's a lot of goons and thugs, drug dealers who then masquerade on gun culture, who then masquerade on a political cause to give themselves legitimacy. Like, in Bihar, every thug and rapist and whatever needed to become a politician at one point of time to give them a shield. That is what is happening in Punjab. Now, like India is the back office operation for several medical, banking and whatever abroad. Khalistan has become the back joint for all these guys, for these drug dealers out here. Okay. Now, when we put in a request to extradite them for drugs or killings or drug related killings, they claim the political angle and say political persecution. This is the situation as it stands today. It's not like they haven't tried to rekindle the Khalistan movement. They have, but it's not going to start off. And we need to understand where the root of a lot of the insurgencies that plagued India through the 70s, mostly through the 80s and 90s lay, and that lay in the Green Revolution. Since MS Swaminathan has died yesterday, it's very important to discuss what the net result was.
Okay.
MS Swaminathan did two things. One that he could not have predicted and one that he should have been able to predict, which is he destroyed our crop diversity in favor of short-term crop availability, which, fine. I mean, it was necessary at that point because we were on the verge of famine. It was literally a ship-to-mouth existence. That is something you could have predicted. What you could not have predicted was that sudden increase in the availability of food through the late 60s and 70s would lead to a massive population boom, where infant mortality, where the improvement in health had reduced infant mortality. You had fertility rates in Punjab of something like 6 or 7.
I see.
Right, which is to say each family was having 6 to 7 kids. Now, when you have 6 to 7 kids, there is, this preference for males. So what ends up happening, because you can depend on males, they will look after you. Whereas if it's a girl, you have to depend on somebody else's male to look after you, kind of thing. Right. Especially in a rural society, which is why female feticide was so high in Punjab, Haryana and the northern belt.
Okay.
Now, what ends up happening is massive population, not enough jobs. In the 1990s is the inflection point. Narasimha Rao's reforms begin the first wave of industrialization, if you want to call it, of India, and the creation of the middle class. But because of the 80s insurgency, there was no investment in Punjab. So Punjab was the one state that skipped industrialization. The demographic dividend of the 1970s came home to roost in the 80s with the insurgency and through the 90s, early 2000s as well, but now it's largely been controlled. I think Bent Singh's killing in 96 was the fag end of the insurgency, if you want to call it. It was the last hurrah, and since then, nothing. Now, what has happened is Canada has become the back-end operation of this drug culture that is there in Punjab. They have been trying to start up terrorism again. But today, Punjab's fertility rate is 1.5.
Okay, it's dropped.
So every 2 parents are mostly having just 1 child. Some maybe are having 2. Now, when you have 5 sons and one says, "मैं जाके खालिस्तान के लिए लड़ूंगा," like, बेटा निकल तू घर से, please निकल घर से. If one child, the only child you have, says, "मैं जाके खालिस्तान के लिए लड़ूंगा," मम्मी बोले, मैंने तेरे को इसलिए सरसों दा साग और मक्की दी रोटी खिलाई थी, घर पे बैठ, IT पढ़ या डॉक्टर पढ़ और डॉक्टर बन. This is what happens. And we all know how Punjabi mothers are. So this is how things happen. How are you going to sustain it? They've tried to trigger it. It is not getting triggered. So demography is our big saver out here. This is a multi-billion-dollar drug business. All drug businesses are multi-billion-dollar drug businesses. They are nasty. They are completely vicious. They are prone to internal bloodletting. This is why, have you noticed, rap culture has developed a lot in Punjab?
Yes, it has.
And it is all about raping women and killing people with guns.
Okay, I've not been paying attention to the lyrics.
Yeah, I mean, this fellow, who was it? Diljit Dosanjh or somebody got into big shit. No, Happy? No, there was one more rapper. I forget which rapper. He got into big...
Shubh.
Ab Shubh tha, but that was for a picture of India. There was another rapper who got into big shit over मैं तेरे को rape करूँगा, मैं तेरे को ये करूँगा, all that kind of nonsense.
Okay, I'm not aware of that.
So it is full of sexual innuendo, it is full of sexual violence, and it is full of violence, period.
Okay.
There is very few rap songs in Punjab that don't reference gun culture.
Okay.
Why? Because it gives cultural legitimacy to your drug dealing.
Okay.
Do you notice a lot of rap culture in America is also tied to the drug culture in America?
It is, yes.
Next, you find, what do Sikhs mostly do when they go to Canada? Trucking. You've got transport, you've got cultural legitimation, and you've got the drugs. Okay, so you've created a whole ecosystem around legitimizing your drug culture, transporting your drugs, social normalization of the culture, and the criminality and the violence that goes around it. Next, what you need is recruits. And this is where Canada has been helping recruit. Because what happens is, multiculturalism mein kya hota hai? Let's be very clear about multiculturalism. White people will be white. If I, as a white man, because I'm actually a Ukrainian, 3,500 years ago, my ancestors came from Ukraine on chariots to civilize all you nasty black people. So when my ancestors came, I mean, anybody can tell, our viewers can tell, from my blonde hair and my blue eyes. So if I decide to genitally mutilate my daughter, I will go to jail.
Yes.
But if my Arab neighbor decides, and let's be clear, it's not Arab, it's very specifically Egyptian, Sudanese, it is a whole set of Northeast African people who practice female genital mutilation. They do it. It is justified as cultural relativity.
Okay.
It is part of their culture. I have actually read a piece in Australia because, in Australia, just before I left, there was a huge Sudanese influx.
Okay.
I was actually reading op-eds in major newspapers saying, we should legalize female genital mutilation. And instead of full pharaonic mutilation, we should make it just localized naam ke vaste snipping of the clitoris. Because then once it comes out into the public, it has to be done by the doctor, so the doctor can reduce the amount of damage and things like this. This is the kind of nonsense you hear.
I see.
Instead of sending the bastard to jail for the next 20, 30 years where he belongs. Okay? So, what ends up happening is this cultural relativity. Now, you are some ordinary Supinder Singh from Bhatinda. You are the son of the local branch manager of the Bank of Patiala. अच्छे स्कूल में गए नहीं हो, हर चीज़ में you talk about BC, MC, whatever, you can't speak English too well because even the schools we went to today can't teach you English that well. I see my own cousins जो हमारी तरह अंग्रेजी बात नहीं, not that English speaking is a this thing, but you know it is a measure of how they're teaching you in school. Anyway, you are socially awkward in a Western country. Okay, Indians generally are very lackadaisical towards body odor.
Okay.
I don't think many of them are even self-aware of body odor, and they're certainly not aware of when you eat with your hands कि हाथ को कैसे धोना है to get rid of all that सरसों का तेल का smell and all of that. You land up in Canada. Okay. Socially, you find that you're not ostracized, but nobody can connect with you. Nobody really wants to hang out with you because of the smell issues or whatever, or the lack of idiom, understanding your idiom. You can't understand their idiom, they can't understand your idiom. People tend to downplay this, but it's very significant. I've seen this with my own eyes in America and Australia. I've lived in Canada, I've only lived in America and Australia. So I can tell you this. I've seen this with the Indian immigrants in Israel as well.
Okay.
Their dependence on community just shoots up like a rocket. They are now dependent on the local Gurdwara to find them jobs, to settle them in, to make their friends or whatever. That Gurdwara has been captured by extremists.
Okay.
Those extremists are mostly in the hold of the Liberal Party, but some of them are also in the hold of the Conservative Party. Stephen Harper tried very hard to take Khalistani votes away from the Liberals.
Okay.
People tend to forget, but if you go back to the archive, I think it was in 2010 or something like that, when Stephen Harper had come to Delhi, his official dinner was cancelled by the government of India to protest Khalistani activities.
I see.
Yes. You can go Google it. So it is cross-party. Okay. Don't think that the Conservatives will be any less. They will just be harder on security. So their assurance to us is that, look, we can't crush this thing, because if people are going saying Khalistan, it's different standards of free speech. What we will do though is we will crush any attempt at illegality that we see.
Okay.
No multiculturalism. So when a Khalistani is doing drugs, we intend to put him in jail. Whereas the liberals will say this is part of their culture.
Okay.
Hash smoking. Technically, a Sardar isn't meant to smoke anything. And yet they're doing drugs. And that is why they mostly do intravenous drugs. I am compliant, but मैं गांजा नहीं फूकूंगा, पर मैं intravenous heroin करूंगा. ठीक है? So there is a criminalization of Canada happening, of the Canadian Sikh happening. There is a ghettoization of new Sikhs moving there happening against their will.
Okay.
Because the elites in that community are the same Jat Sikh elites out here that have a stranglehold, that 20% of the population that control everything. I mean, look at it. AAP Chief Minister, Jat Sikh. Akali Dal Chief Minister, Jat Sikh. Head of the Congress in this thing, Jat Sikh. How is it that 20% of the population has the head of everything? The remaining 80% of the Sikhs exist nahi karte hain kya? So there is the elites out there are the same as the elites out here. They are rapine, they are extortive, they are exploitative, and they sell their services to the local politicians. So if you go, for example, to this man, the former defense minister Sardar, Kaun Sajjan?
Oh, Sajjan something, yes.
Sajjan something.
Yes.
His primaries that he won when Justin Trudeau first defeated Stephen Harper, in his own primary, in his constituency, they sent in the shock troops, Sardar shock troops, to physically throw out any moderate Sikhs.
Okay.
The Royal Canadian Mounted Police were standing outside. They did nothing. You know why? Cultural relativity.
Okay.
So he hijacked it. So there's been a full hijacking. Justin Trudeau oversaw a radical hijacking of the Sikh community nominations out there. So now I've built up all the layers out here. So the leadership terrorizes the population into compliance, and the leadership sells their services either to the Liberal Party or the NDP or the Conservative Party, depending on how many crumbs you throw at them.
Okay.
It is a very wealthy community. Because remember, truck drivers there make a lot of money, unlike here. It is also a community that has infiltrated all sections of government. Remember, Sajjan was your defense minister.
Yes.
He was also the head of the violent criminal gang unit in Vancouver Police Department. Incidentally, there's a story about that. Indian intelligence believes that he eliminated all the other gangs so that the Khalistani gangs would rise.
Okay.
He went after every gang except the Khalistani gang, which is why Mexican drug cartels are all outsourced to, their rule ends with America. In Canada, when you enter, their local franchisee are Khalistani drug cartels.
I see.
Yes. So where do you even start with this problem? Okay, so this is how I've taken almost 20 minutes to explain this, because it's a very complex sociological problem with too many layers, one on top of the other. अब इसमें क्या होता है? Understand the addiction that every Canadian politician has towards the Khalistan constituency. It is not going anywhere.
Okay.
ठीक है? अब इसमें क्या होता है? 2018, Justin Trudeau comes to India.
Yes.
It is a disaster of a trip.
It was, yes.
Everything that can go wrong goes wrong out there. He should have known about cultural appropriation. He still wears kurta pajama and decides to do bhangra and all that nonsense, thinking he was going to get feted. Obviously, he wasn't. Then he invites a terrorist to the official dinner, not once, but to 2 official dinners.
Yes.
So on and so forth. And then his national security advisor says, oh, the Indians trapped us into doing it. He fundamentally believes since 2018 that the Indians are out to get him.
Okay.
Okay, it is not the baggage from G20 gone wrong. It is still the baggage from 2018 gone wrong. Okay, fast forward to today. Some intel comes. Now, this guy Nijjar has been meeting with Canadian intelligence for almost a year every single week.
Yeah, that's right.
What do you think his fellows in those drug smuggling networks would have thought about it?
Snitch.
Snitch.
Yes.
Snitch. Ripu Daman Malik, his great adversary, wasn't killed because he turned into a patriotic Indian. He was killed because he was also part of a drug racket. See, if you are a Khalistani and in politics out there, you are in some way or another connected to the drug racket. Okay? You cannot be in Khalistani politics in Punjab, in Canada, without being connected to the drug racket. Now, your intelligence, like we discussed, is compromised. There are Khalistanis sitting in intel. There are Khalistanis sitting in police. There are Khalistanis sitting in the Department of Defense. A CSIS agent who is also a druggie and a Khalistani gets bumped off. I suspect it was druggies bumping him off.
Okay.
Okay. It's a huge setback to CSIS. They need somebody to blame for this. They decide to collect intel. The way the Five Eyes work is, Indians don't understand this. We're outraged that America shared intel. There is no authorization given to share intel in the Five Eyes. Any one of the Five Eye countries can approach at a lateral level and say, bhai, mere ko ye de de, wo de de, wo de de. And it is shared. The intel was shared. It is raw intel. Raw intel is very different from the processed intel given to a leadership.
Yes.
Okay. The processed intel gives the conclusions. The raw intel is the in-depth report, the 500-page report that no Prime Minister reads. The Prime Minister only reads the executive summary on top, the 2 pages on top. This guy has decided that they're going to skew the report to show that the Indian government was involved in it.
Okay.
And they've given it to the Prime Minister. Now, he sends his national security advisor not once but twice to India to tell the Indians ki bhai, hand over these guys. And the Indians are like, bhai, kisko hand over kare? Evidence kya hai? Intel kya hai tumhare paas? Evidence nahi hai to kam se kam raw intel to dikhao kya hai? And they're like, we can't show you. Why? Because you are not allowed to share Five Eyes intel outside the Five Eye. If it exists.
Yes, if it
because
exists.
The Americans are privately telling me that there's somebody in CSIS is really cocked up because they've completely misinterpreted the intel out there.
Okay.
That is their internal assessment. Anyway, now the Globe and Mail, because they are upset that Justin Trudeau isn't going public with it. One of these Khalistanis sitting inside Intel decides to leak that this report exists to the Globe and Mail.
Okay.
And the Globe and Mail reaches out to the PMO saying, we're publishing it. Do you want to say something? And just because he's been pissed off with India over G20, which is an added slight to what happened, not to mention the fracas with his cocaine-loaded plane being stuck on the tarmac for 3 days, he decides to go public to preempt the Globe and Mail. It also suits him because all the Chinese foreign interference is directly about money paid to him and his father's foundation, the Pierre Trudeau Foundation, and things like that.
Okay.
So it suits him in several different ways to do it. But he hasn't thought things through. First, because it was done in such a rushed fashion, you never go public with Intel till you call up your Five Eyes partner and say, will you support me publicly? If he had done that, they would have all said no. In private, they are more than willing to convey concerns to India.
Yes.
Which is saying, like, if you and, your neighbor are having a fight, and assume I know your neighbor, you come and tell me, Abhijit, वो जो विशाल है ना, वो बहुत कमीना इंसान है, etc., etc. Like, I will convey your concerns. Then I go to Vishal, बेटा, ये क्या हो रहा है? तुम और अभिजीत क्यों लड़ रहे हो? Kiss and make up. There's nothing hostile about it. It's just friendly saying, sort it out. He's not got the support he wants. He can't release the intel because it's Five Eyes Intel. Plus, the Americans are quite clear that they misinterpreted the intel. So they decide to start leaking to papers. They get different people to look at the intel and say, oh, it's credible intel. Okay. It isn't very specific, but it's credible. Exact words that Hugmeet used when he saw the intel. There is no way forward from here. The only way to backtrack on this is for Canada to backtrack.
Right.
Because India is in no mood to backtrack. I can tell you, all the MEA babus and everything, everybody's got their claws sharpened. And they're just waiting. They're just waiting to scratch him more. One more step out of line. And, the last press conference, we said that we want parity in diplomatic staff.
Yes.
They will shut down both the Chandigarh consulate and they will trim the number of Canadian staff and expel all the excess staff. Mind you, we still haven't followed up on it.
Yes.
We have asked the Canadians to ensure parity. We will follow up on it if they try any other stunt, which they're not. So the issue is effectively dead, more or less, but we are now continuing to cancel all the OCIs in a very careful, systematic manner.
Okay.
We are assessing every single video we find. We're going after the properties of every video that we find in India. We are going after their OCIs and their visas, which is very important. People in India don't realize how important it is.
Okay.
But a Jat Sikh is very attached to his ancestral property. It's almost his identity in a way. A Sikh in general, because they're an agrarian community.
Okay.
So it's very important to them. It might just be 2 cents of land, almost un-arable land, fractionalized to where you can't even put 2 chappals. But he's still attached to that land.
Okay.
So that is where it's going to go from now on.
Okay. So what other measures could India take apart from cancelling OCI cards and visas and trimming down the staff?
And shutting down the Chandigarh consulate. But that's huge.
That's huge, right?
The effect it will have is right now. See what happens when you have trained up a whole BPO staff, behind back office operations staff, to support drug dealing and gun running in India, and your interface is completely cut off. The criminality refracts back onto the local society.
Yes.
So you will see increasing criminality happen in Canada.
Okay.
This needs to be implemented over multiple years. Incidentally, the person who ruined this was Modi.
Okay.
The Congress was very strict about this. Modi came. Modi has this great reverence towards the Sikh Granth and the Gurus and Sikhs in general. He's very Indic in that way, no? So he's the one that started doing all this reach out to Khalistanis and whatever. Unhone muh pe thuka. He still didn't get it and he still believed I can do something. All his realism with Pakistan ends with his sentimentality to the Khalistanis. It took the farm protests for him to wake up. But he's finally woken up. Okay. Now, Do I think India carried out those attacks? No. But did India make a deal with these local druggies saying, I will let 2 of your shipments go through if you start hunting down these Nijjar and that Sukhdev Singh. Sukhdev Singh, mind you, died 3 days after this whole controversy broke out. And notice no newspaper in India or Canada is carrying that news. Why?
Yes, that's right.
Why? They don't want to talk about it. Nobody's talking about Ripu Daman Singh. Why? They only want to talk about Nijjar.
Yes.
Why?
Why is that?
Because he was a CSIS operative.
That's right.
Right? These two are not. But the CSIS operative was also a druggie.
Right.
And they want to find scapegoats, basically. So I think India would have, gently said, I might turn a blind eye to you for a month if you go around doing this kind of crap. Which is why I want you to notice. Has any Indian government official said, quote unquote, we did not do it?
No one has said that.
We've said it's absurd.
Yes.
We've said it's outrageous. And the foreign minister, when asked yesterday, said it is against government policy.
Okay.
No Indian has said we didn't do this.
Right. Interesting. Do you think there's a Canadian hand behind this, the Sikh protests, the farmer protests?
Of course. I mean, we all knew there was a Canadian hand. There was the open verbal support by that Trudeau fellow. And several politicians. I mean, we focus too much on Trudeau. We don't look at all the other Sikh politicians, both conservative, NDP and liberal, that were tweeting about it in support. There was a huge transfer of money through Western Union and all that crap to these accounts. There was a full-scale flash funding of a flash mob, essentially.
Okay. Right. And they kind of took over Delhi for a while, right?
They did.
Yeah.
They did. And what did the government do? They hamare bhai hain. Chumma, Japia Papia. I've never understood this North Indian proclivity for Japia Papia politics. Vajpayee used to do it with Nawaz Sharif. Modi does it with the Khalistanis. Finally, thankfully, Modi's love for Khalistanis, I think, has finally ended now. Thank God. He learns from his mistakes. He's still not learnt on internal security to crack down before a situation escalates. But he's learnt that Khalistanis are not your friends.
What do you make of this guy, Pannu, who is a US citizen, isn't he?
Boss, I'm telling you, this Gurpatwant Singh Pannu is an Indian agent. I'm telling you, he's a raw agent.
Okay.
I'll tell you why. The fellow's a bloody joker. He is there to bring a bad name to Khalistan. He is the only guy who put up the slogan saying, all Hindus get out. Which then brought about condemnations from all the... Imagine, killing the Indian ambassador and all did not get the condemnations. But all Indo-Canadians get out. Who put that poster up? Gurpatwant Singh Pannu.
Yes.
Who makes a joke of these referendums by saying, Bhaiyo, मैं बोलता हूँ, जाके vote करो, and there will be the freedom for the Khalistan. It's Gurpatwant Singh Pannu.
Yes.
He makes a joke of the Khalistan referendums. He completely hijacked and destroyed this entire narrative of India doing it by that Indo-Canadians get out. So the narrative shifted from the killing of Sikhs to the extermination of Hindus from Canadian society. He is a raw agent.
That's great. And this problem...
And samajh lo, Khalistani itne thiye hain that they don't even understand the bugger is a raw agent sitting there and undermining everything that they're doing.
Good for us.
Good for us.
Now, there's this problem exists even in the other Five Eyes countries, right? The UK, Australia. In the UK, you had these incidents in which the Indian diplomatic properties were attacked.
Yes.
Have we taken that up with the UK government? I mean, is something being done there?
It was done immediately. You remember one of the things I'd suggested that same day was to remove all the barricades and extra security in front of the British embassy. It was done.
Okay.
And within 6 hours, the British had provided extra security to our embassy out there. I suspect that's the way we'll go with Canada if they don't behave themselves as well. Let's see what happens. UK has kind of learnt a lesson. Okay. Kind of, not entirely. Because remember, all these places, the Sikhs are an important vote bank to play. Yes. It's not so much in Australia. but it is in New Zealand,
Okay.
kind of. But New Zealand has stayed absolutely quiet.
Yes.
There's lots of Punjabis. I don't know if there's Sikhs in New Zealand. It's not so. When I lived in Australia, that was at the ending phases of the war. My entire time in Melbourne was denying my Tamil identity. I couldn't be a Tamil in public.
Okay.
Because if people found out I was a Tamil, the LTT would land up and extort me
Okay.
for freedom movement.
Okay. Okay. Mhm.
Okay? And that is what happens to a lot of Sikhs. Imagine Ujjwal Dosanjh, who's been the premier of a chief minister of a Canadian state, because he refuses to support Khalistanis, had a near fatal attack on him. It left him permanently disabled. Nobody wants to talk about that.
Right.
Right. This is it's good because now that these OCIs are going to start getting cancelled, all that crime is going to refract back onto Canadian society, and that is what Canada deserves.
Yes, right. Now, why do you think that the Khalistani movement and support for Khalistan is only present mostly in the Five Eyes nations? Why not in France? Why not in Spain?
It's a lot in Italy. We don't
Italy.
see it.
Okay.
See, the problem is our press only highlights English-speaking countries.
Okay.
Because our press, like our diplomats, don't bother learning any other languages. You know, I've met so many diplomats who claim they know XYZ language. When I go talk to them in XYZ language, I'm like, I mean, your Italian's as good as mine. And
Okay.
it's not terribly good. It's definitely not an operational level for you to understand extreme nuance. But it is there. It is very, very significant in Italy because
Okay.
remember, the entire mozzarella, the cheese business is controlled by Punjabis, by
I
Sikhs.
see. Okay.
There is a huge, my friend Francesca Marino has been covering a lot of this. The problem is India doesn't pick it up because they're like, Italy, who gives a shit? Do you know 2611 financing was done from southern Italy?
I see.
Yes.
Okay.
Nobody picked it up. Francesca did that story as well.
Okay.
It is a Sikh Khalistani plus ISI nexus that developed in southern Italy. But now because Pakistani bhikari ho gaye hain, the Sikhs are like, why the hell do we need to go through you? We have enough capacity to do things ourselves. So what was a co-option of the Sikh community to support ISI goals has now become a full-blown Sikh community venture to support Khalistan goals.
Okay.
Which of course, like we discussed, isn't taking off, but it's to support drug running.
Right.
Okay. In Italy, it's not so much about drugs, it's more about illegal immigration.
Okay.
Or well, legal immigration as well. But in Italy, it's more illegal immigration because the Italians are quite strict about letting people in. You have to be conversant with the language. You have to learn Italian. You know, they are linguistic countries. Germany won't let you become a German. France won't let you become French. Italy won't let you become Italian unless you speak those languages with a certain level of fluency. But it is, our embassy, in fact, got vandalized a few days back in Italy.
Okay.
Did you know this?
I was not aware of
Yeah,
that.
it was.
Okay.
Our diplomats got assaulted in Italy a few days back.
I see.
Yeah. Go to Francesca Marino's timeline, you'll see
Okay.
all of this. The problem is we're only concerned about English-speaking countries. क्रिकेट खेलते हैं, हम बात करेंगे. क्रिकेट नहीं खेलते हो, हमारा क्या है? की फर्क पैंदा है. But Italy is one of the big centers of this, southern Italy especially.
Any other place?
Not that I know of,
Okay.
because I am also restricted by Italy is almost like a second home to me, right?
Okay.
So it's, I follow Italian politics. I follow European politics quite a bit. So Germany, France, Italy, I'm usually up to date on what's happening, but there's not much happening in France and Germany.
Okay.
Italy is the one country where I know something is happening. There's a lot of slow immigration happening to Spain. I'm trying to find somebody to track it. I don't much care for Spain, so I don't have many sources out there.
Okay.
Because, you know, I don't depend on the press to inform me. I usually depend on my sources on the ground, which can be horribly wrong at times, but I would much rather depend on primary reportage than secondary reportage.
Right. What do you make of the Canadians inviting a Ukrainian Nazi to their parliament?
But that's natural for them.
That's natural, isn't it?
Chrystia Freeland, the deputy prime minister, is a Nazi. It's not just her grandfather is a Nazi.
Her uncle.
She herself is a Nazi.
She herself.
No, she herself is a Nazi.
Okay.
Kolmiak, her grandfather, Mikhailo Kolmiak, her grandfather, was an actual Nazi.
Yes.
He drew up the lists based on which the German army used to go collect people for execution. There is a high likelihood that at one point of time, Kolniak, that is to say the Canadian Deputy Prime Minister's grandfather, was drawing up the list for Zelensky's grandfather to be arrested and executed.
Okay.
Okay? Actual story. This is not fake. It's, in all likelihood, it's what would have happened. The son was also a Nazi because he grew up in that environment. Chrystia herself is a Nazi.
She visited the USSR, right?
She claims to be, we'll get to that in a second. She worked for a Ukrainian-Canadian newspaper, an English Ukrainian-Canadian newspaper in her early days, which actually carried SS Galician ads for veterans of SS Galician to have their reunions and shit like that.
I see.
Right? Number one. So she herself is a Nazi. Let's be clear about this. Number one. Number two, being a Ukrainian extraction, claiming to be a Ukraine and USSR expert, former USSR expert, how did you not know that fighting the Russians wasn't a Nazi? Are you seriously telling me she didn't know when she stood up?
Oh, of course she knew about it.
Of course she knew. She knew exactly what was happening. Second, you can claim all of these people, the Canadian hai, dumb hai, okay. Zelensky didn't know. Whose own community got butchered, he didn't know what fighting against the Russians in 1940, 41, 42, 43 meant. Really?
Of course he knew.
Of course he knew.
Yeah.
He knew exactly who he was standing up for. Pierre Trudeau, I will give the benefit of the doubt because he's a bimbo.
Justin.
Same.
Both.
Same thing. Do we know if Pierre is actually the father?
Not quite sure.
Could be Fidel.
Could be Fidel.
I mean, there's two. He looks more like Fidel than he does.
He does.
Yeah. So this is an issue. This is an issue that you have deliberate whitewashing of Nazis. But what is more disturbing is the Canadian press. Nobody in the Canadian press has the guts to ask Chrystia Freeland about her grandfather, repeatedly ask her, because she claims it's Russian disinformation.
Okay.
When the whole story came out, she claimed it was disinformation. Nobody in that press conference had the guts to ask her, you claim to be an expert. How did you not know and stand up? Did your brain not process it? Where is Chrystia Freeland's apology? She joined that.
Yes.
She's the expert.
Yes.
Where is her apology? Zero. So you have a deputy prime minister who's a Nazi inviting an out-and-out Nazi boy. He may be a Jew, but he's the Judenrat. Let's be clear about it. For all our viewers, please Google Judenrat. And there is this concept of pink washing. Do you know what pink washing is?
No.
So all the Arab states once upon a time used to accuse Israel of pink washing.
Okay.
That you deprive the Palestinians of civil rights. Israel doesn't deprive them of civil rights, by the way. But anyway, you deprive them of civil rights. But then you show off your Tel Aviv Pride Parade to use homosexuals to whitewash your civil liberties crimes.
Okay.
So using homosexuals to whitewash your crimes is called pink washing.
I see. Okay.
What the Ukrainians are doing is using Zelensky for Jew washing.
Okay.
Here is our token Jew, therefore we cannot be Nazis. But Zelensky is an out-and-out bloody Nazi.
He is.
You remember, people have forgotten what happened in the Greek parliament. Do you remember he got that so-called...
He did. Yes.
The Crimean...
Azov thing?
Crimean Greek. He claimed he was a Crimean Greek who couldn't speak a word of Greek, who gave the speech in Ukrainian or English or whatever. And it turned out he was an Azov Brigade Nazi.
Yes, he was.
Tell me how many episodes... There is not a single piece of propaganda that comes out of Ukraine that doesn't bear some Nazi symbology in some place or the other.
That's right.
Why is that? You saw that picture just 2-3 days back, that video of the Ukrainian father back to his house with the kids kissing him. And what is he wearing? The bloody Nazi eagle with the swastika and everything down on his t-shirt.
Yes.
How is it that every single image has Nazi signs?
Yes.
It's incredible.
Yes.
It is an outright Nazi state, full stop.
That's what it is.
That is what it is.
Yes.
It's the last remnant of the Third Reich, if you want to call it that. Or it's the Fourth Reich reborn,
Yes. It's a reincarnation.
basically.
Yes.
Why are we surprised? There are stories about Justin Trudeau's dad, Pierre, who used to go around with a Nazi Stahlhelm,
Okay.
riding his bike.
Okay.
A lot of bikers wear that Stahlhelm.
Uh-huh.
That typical, the German military helmet in the First World War was the Pickelhaube, which had that pointy tip, which Bismarck is seen wearing.
Yes.
By the end of the First World War, that classic Nazi helmet, the Stahlhelm, had already become standard. And some bikers wear it today.
Okay.
Some bikers. Pierre Trudeau apparently used to go around his motorbike in a Stahlhelm.
I see.
He came up with these policies. They came up with the policies of settling down Nazis in Canada.
At least 20,000, if I'm not mistaken.
30.
30. Okay.
At least 30, which is a lot in those days. Remember, Canada's population was much less then. So as a percentage of population, it was insane. Why do we ignore all of this? And our problem is we start talking about it only when it suits us. I believe that every month there should be one article in every major, the government should invest in one article on every major newspaper to talk about organized crime in America, the racism of Black Lives Matter, Khalistanis being a front for organized crime in Canada, Canada's racism, Canada's Nazism, the UK's silence on this thing. Why do we not do that? Why do we only raise these issues now?
That's right.
There should be a generally negative impression of these countries created in the Indian press, so that any concession we give them should be magnified. It is also a powerful diplomatic tool, because then you can say, the public mood is against you. So, us even giving you an FTA, we're technically only giving you market access for $1 billion, but think of it as $5 billion, because the remaining 4 is political capital that we've lost in giving you this.
Right. And it's not just the Canadians, right? It's even the Americans that have,
of course,
sheltered Nazis.
Of course.
Wernher von Braun was a great example.
So, the entire space race, as somebody summed it up, was our Nazis versus your Nazis. Because the Soviets all used Nazi engineers, and the Americans used all Nazi engineers.
Yes.
Wernher von Braun is the most visible face of everything.
Yes.
Conveniently whitewashed, made to seem like this lovey-dovey uncle.
Yes.
He came up with the bloody V2 rockets that were terror weapons.
Yes.
I mean, V stood for revenge.
Yes.
Revenge rocket. Yeah, vengeance rocket.
Yes.
So, but this is what they do.
Yeah.
They whitewash Nazis.
And it's interesting that Israel went after the Nazis in South America, but never after these Nazis. No.
I think a lot of it had to do with documentation. They couldn't go after all the Nazis. They only went after the ringleaders. So they went after Eichmann and people like that. Remember, they did carry out targeted killings in Canada and Norway of Palestinian terrorists, because remember, that period of catching Nazis was a very small period. And then, the entire priority of Israeli intelligence shifted to Palestinians.
After the Olympics incident and all
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Not from settling past crimes, but from settling current crimes against the state of Israel.
What do you make of the G20 summit? Is it a big success for India?
Yeah, it is. I think it's undeniably a big success. Everything went smoothly, except Justin Trudeau's plane.
Yes.
And we achieved a consensus document between countries fighting each other through proxy.
Yes.
No mean feat. So I think you should acknowledge, I'm a big critic of Amitabh Kant and Jaishankar, but I think you should acknowledge when they do something right, it must be acknowledged. And I think it was a huge success for us when you manage to get a working document, when you manage to get everybody in the room without any fights or flare-ups. and you manage to produce a working document. I think my only criticism of that entire conference is this millet-based food.
Okay.
यार वो दुश्मन को भी यार मिलेट के साथ बहुत अच्छा खाना मिलता है पता है. If you try foxtail millet dosa, no sorry not foxtail millet, barnyard millet dosa, they are delicious.
Okay.
They're actually better than regular dosa sometimes.
Okay.
But that menu was not a good millet menu, I'll tell you that.
Okay.
पता नहीं किस गवर्नमेंट केटरिंग कॉलेज से आपने ये मेन्यू बनवाया था, बट यार मेहमान आए कुछ अच्छा तो खिलाओ यार. Just because you're fixated on millets, don't shove it down everybody else's throat, no? So I think that was an opportunity lost for a cultural display, because I don't know why in India we don't understand that our possibly are more than yoga, more than meditation. Our biggest soft power is Indian food.
Yes, cuisine, yeah.
And yet it is the one we always keep throwing under the truck. We've done nothing to, create the terroir system that the French have. We've done nothing to, create the authentic recipe, food research, this and that.
I agree,
कुछ भी
yes.
नहीं करते हैं.
Yes, yes.
And I'm telling you, Indian food is more profitable than yoga, meditation, all these things put together.
Right.
If you channel it the way the Thais did. Nobody knows this, but every Thai restaurant around the world is outlet to a Thai agency which finds you the recipes. They'll give you the authentic stuffs from Thailand.
Okay.
It is very curated. People don't realize this. And that is why Thai food has grown to the proportions and standards that it has today.
Okay.
Right. And they see to it that it's authentic. It's not the crap that you get in the Balti houses of Birmingham.
Okay.
That isn't authentic stuff. It is a kind of thing. Like the Vindaloo that you get in abroad.
Yeah.
It tastes nothing like the Goan Vindaloo, boss. What is chicken madras?
I would not know.
I would not know. And this chicken madras recipe changes from restaurant to restaurant.
Yes.
Chicken tikka masala, at least you can say, is butter chicken.
Yes.
But other than that, I think the G20 went off fabulously well. It is a cap in our feather. We should be very clear about this. Yeah.
How do you think they got everyone together and managed to get out of
A lot of work. I think what they did is they bogged them down in so much paperwork that so much, I think there was 20,000 words of inanity in there, and say about 1,000 words of sense, which in the process of reading the 20,000 words of inanity, you left out the 1,000 words of sense. It's how that famous joke in Yes, Prime Minister, that the operative file is always at the bottom of the third box of files.
Okay.
So by the time you're done with 2 boxes, you're already terribly sleepy. You go through the third box, and then when you come to the last file, you're not paying attention anymore and you just sign off on it. But it was also a lot of verbal finesse. And linguistic finesse and diplomatic skill, cajoling people, finding the language that everybody agrees to.
Right.
Very, very important. Things on climate financing that they agree to, very, very important. Because if you want us to go green, please offset us. Okay, very important. Getting the African states in there, very important.
Very important. Yes.
Getting this data and energy corridor between the India, Middle East and Europe, very, very important.
Very much so.
Because, with Iran, the Pakistanis might have tried to bomb a gas pipeline. With Saudi Arabia, they won't dare bombing that pipeline.
Right.
No matter what. So, and this biofuel, I am very anti-biofuel.
Okay.
But let's appreciate bringing them all together for the Biofuel Alliance. Because, my issue with biofuel is the best kind of ethanol is produced from sugarcane.
Yes.
Which is also the most destructive to your soil.
It's terrible, yes.
And it brings about this fuel or food dilemma when you're growing crops. You can't, in a country like India, overpopulated country like India, you can't afford land to be grown for fuel. So it's very dangerous. I think the future lies in hydrogen. which Nitin Gadkari is incidentally pioneering, and that's the path Reliance wants to go down.
I see.
Because there's been lots of major improvements that have happened in hydrogen. The big thing about hydrogen was the energy efficiency of producing hydrogen. It was a very energy inefficient process.
Okay.
But now it's become very, there are certain patents and companies that Reliance has bought that have made hydrogen extremely eco-friendly.
Okay.
And imagine, boss, you spend somewhere between 100 to 200 billion dollars a year on fuel import. If you go to hydrogen, there is no charging time involved. You just see the hydrogen dalo and the exhaust is water.
It's water, yes, water vapor.
It's water vapor.
Yes.
And agar condensation hata hai, to water bhi ho jayega. So it's a fantastic way for you to be getting completely energy independent. I almost see it as a Bronze Age to Iron Age change. Because, Bronze Age, because of the requirement for tin, necessitated overseas trade networks.
Yes.
Whereas iron can be produced in situ anywhere. We're going to see a mindset change like that when hydrogen comes in. And remember, nobody talks about the trail of the EV. What happens to the battery full of corrosive things when after the 8 years of the shelf life of your battery is over?
You're going to have to dump it somewhere. It's going to be a disaster.
It's a disaster.
Yes.
It's a complete disaster. Nobody's thinking about it.
EVs are not the right way in the long term.
They're not.
Yeah.
And, I thought about this only when I was thinking about, there was there's a great Italian architect who made this point. Sustainability isn't looking at 50 years. Sustainability is looking at 2000 years. The Romans built sustainably.
Yes.
The cement that they used is still standing.
It is, yes.
You go to the Pantheon, it is still shines the way it shone once upon a time. Had the Colosseum not been used as a quarry for construction material, it would have shone the way it shone once upon a time. That is much more sustainable than having a building that needs to be pulled down every 50 years because it's made from substandard materials.
That's right, yeah. Right. So we have what do you make of the IMEC, the India Middle East Trade Corridor? Is it going to be a challenge? I mean, a competitor to the
so a lot of the confusion I had in the beginning is because we call it a trade corridor.
Okay. It's not just a trade corridor, right?
Yeah. I think the trade is the most overstated part of it and probably the least cost beneficial.
Okay.
It is the energy transfer and the data transfer that is important. That data transfer cable is very important for businesses to operate. The gas and solar transfer. Can you imagine we become a net exporter of energy? We have enough solar if we invest in it for Saudi Arabia and India to be supplying solar energy both for our needs and to export it to Europe through a gridded undersea cable network. Gas for your cooking and things like that. Europe uses it for heating, we use it for cooking.
Yeah.
For that to come through, I think it is fabulous. And because you're benefiting from a single pipeline that's going to be doing well, a single laying of a cable and pipeline and things, all the energy going in at the same. It's not like NDMC in Delhi, which digs up someplace after the road department has laid a new road, and then the water department comes and decides to dig up the gas connection and then do it again, and then
yeah, we know how it is.
So I in terms of energy exchange and all of that, it's fantastic. Now the thing in India is most of our solar panels are Chinese shit.
Okay.
Why haven't we gotten into solar panel production?
Yes.
We need to get into that.
Yes, we do.
I am more enthused about solar energy in India than I am. I've never supported wind energy.
Okay.
Even water, I only give qualified support because those big Nehruvian dams. We never studied about Nehruvian dam, the failure of Nehruvian dams in India. We've only taught about the failure of the Aswan High Dam because Nasser did it, Nehru didn't do it.
Okay.
A water is an ecosystem. It provides nutrients downstream. It provides all kinds of critical sustenance and livelihood issues downstream. You can't just have blockages happen. You need run-of-the-mill dams which provide localized low levels of electricity here and there. We didn't do that. But anyway, wo purani baat hai. But solar is sustainable.
Yes.
It is very good for you. It is doable on a large scale because solar, what it does is it protects the ground. Say it in cities. Why don't you put solar shields over all your roads? Turn them into solar collectors. And you see what ends up happening is that it reduces the amount of AC consumption because there is at least 5-6 degrees of shade under that thing for cars below. Okay. And you're just using up wasted space.
Yes.
You know, we're doing things like solar covering of water channels, which is very important because what happens is birds can then go through the side and things and drink water. It prevents water evaporation and it's giving you solar power.
Yes.
Okay, there are fantastic ways of using solar in an ecologically, you know, when I think about the potential of solar power in this country, it is just incredible.
Right.
But you know, all solutions are system of systems. You need solar with rules for, you know, 6-foot offset balcony so that direct sunlight doesn't come. Balcony में अगर कांच लगा रहे हो, यार लोग इधर कांच balcony लगाते हैं, देखा है? Which makes your balcony even hotter.
Yes, sir. That's right.
Instead, you put a solar panel instead of that, it will collect solar, this thing.
Yes.
Why don't you do that? There is so much potential if it's properly interfaced and exploited. We need to do that.
Right.
I'm very optimistic, but knowing India, we will always screw up at some level of the synchronization of the system of systems.
But assuming we don't screw up, this is a great thing, the IMAG, right?
Yeah.
It's just not solar, it's the data as well.
It's solar, data, and gas.
And gas, right. Do you think it could be a competitor to the BRI?
I hope not, because the BRI is shit. Let's be clear about it. Tell me one economically viable project in the BRI.
I can't think of one.
There's not one. There is not one project out there that is economically viable.
Yes.
Okay. So, I don't want it to turn into a white elephant. So I'm very happy with this, with even if the gas, energy and data work out, it is a fantastic game-changing project. If the trade works out, even better. I think a lot of our misconceptions about the trade viability of this are due to misconceptions about how ships work.
Okay.
You know, today, a ship needs to have a ship to dock in a port needs to have a hinterland of about $80 billion minimum.
Okay.
They're not willing to dock in ports less than that.
Okay.
Why? You know, before, ships didn't have range. So they had to go through the Suez, stop at Aden. Then from Aden, they would have to stop at Bombay. From Bombay, they would have to then stop at Colombo. From Colombo, they would then have to stop at Singapore. Just like the same way, if 40 years back, if you were traveling from, I remember even 30 years back in the 80s when we used to go to London, it used to be a 2-stop flight. Yaad hai? It used to be Delhi to Bahrain, Bahrain to Rome, and then Rome to London. On the 707s.
707s.
You couldn't do a direct flight. Today you do direct flights right up to San Francisco.
Yes.
Okay? So the same thing has happened. And a 777 transports 3-4 times the number of passengers that a 707 could. Right? That is what has happened with container shipping.
Okay.
So they are only looking to go to big ports.
Okay.
They are not looking to go to these small ports. So my question here is, what exactly are you trading that requires you to go from here to Dubai port, get offloaded on Dubai port and transported by land through to Israel?
Yes.
And then from Israel to Piraeus on ship. The economics of it are not making sense to me, because it is much cheaper to put it onto a ship in Bombay, go through the Suez, directly to Rotterdam or wherever. It doesn't even need to go to Piraeus, and it's quicker because Suez to Rotterdam sailing time is shorter than Piraeus to Rotterdam road time.
Okay.
Fundamentally.
Okay.
Even though it's a much longer route.
Okay, so that's
much greater volume. Because remember, those same assume a big container ship, a Suezmax, can take about, so the Suezmax and Panamax, that is maximum width available for crossing the Suez and maximum width available for crossing the Panama Canal. A Suezmax can say, I don't know, I'm just making this up, 500 tractors.
Okay.
500 tractors put onto 2 trailers each 2 tractors per trailer on roads from Piraeus to Rotterdam. How many trucks, how many trailers all the way to Rotterdam compared to boat? So it's more energy efficient, it's also time efficient.
Okay, so the trade, the transport may not really make a lot of sense.
It may not make a lot of sense.
And you have to build railway lines across the Saudi desert as well, I suppose?
I don't think it makes sense.
It doesn't make sense, right?
I don't think it makes sense.
Right.
Maybe say from Makkah to Medina for the pilgrims, or from Jeddah to Makkah, or say Jeddah to Riyadh, the 2 most important cities to one another, it'll make sense. For example, like in China, the only high-speed train that makes sense is Beijing-Shanghai, or say Beijing-Dalian at most. The rest are all shit. None of them are producing profit.
Okay.
That is why China Rail is now what? It's almost $1 trillion in loss. No?
Okay.
High-speed rail is fantastic for small to medium-sized countries like Taiwan, France, Japan, Germany, Spain. They are not okay for large-sized countries, and certainly, and Saudi Arabia is a very large-sized country. People forget it's the next biggest country after us is Argentina, and after Argentina, I think it's Kazakhstan, Argentina, and then Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
It used to be Sudan, but Sudan broke up.
Sudan broke up, yes. Do you think India needs larger ports? We are coming up with a huge port in somewhere in the Andamans, right?
In Nicobar. See, I think that is also a stupid project.
Okay.
Because we don't realize it's not about building a port, it's about the hinterland. Pondicherry has an airport. Do you know Pondicherry has an airport?
I'm aware of it, yes.
How many people fly there?
No one.
Nobody.
Yeah. You go to Chennai and then you drive down. Yeah.
Apparently, SpiceJet is again starting operations from the 1st of October tomorrow.
Okay.
But it won't work. They'll shut it down.
Okay.
Because there's just not enough traffic going there.
Yes.
See, because commerce needs a economic hinterland.
Yes.
Udhar kya economic hinterland hai? See, it is this fallacy in a developed country. When you build infrastructure, it eases out a lot of things. Therefore, there is a huge disproportionate return on investment. In a third world country, when you build infrastructure, there is no real return on investment because your regulatory mechanisms are not right. Your business environment is not right. Your police and judiciary and dispute resolution mechanisms are not right, especially. So, I don't think it will.
Okay. Coming back to the G20, what do you make of Xi Jinping's decision not to attend the summit?
No, he's snubbing us for what happened in South Africa.
Okay.
He was looking in that direct meeting to get some kind of a concession.
Okay.
The talks, incidentally, are going very well for us, by the way. I'm
How
not
so?
going to. We can't talk about it.
Okay.
But jab khatam hoga, when the deal is announced, then I'll tell you what the contours of this thing were. He wanted some great concession by Modi. Modi didn't give him an inch.
I see.
And they have this mentality ki if you don't give us, we will not bless you with a visit from our God Emperor.
Okay.
They think it's a huge favor. They're too used to Pakistanis, you see.
Yes.
So they think him coming to India is a great favor they're doing to us. He said, nahi aana hai, to mat aao bhai. And they didn't come, bas.
So was it actually something that helped the summit move along better?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah. I think so. Because Xi Jinping is not... even if he'd come, it would have moved along because most of the documents had already been finalized by then.
Okay.
It was really a question... the big question mark was always about sovereignty and territorial integrity because of what's happening in Ukraine.
Yes.
Which had anyway been sorted out. So, aaya, gaya, ki fark penda hai.
What do you make of all these disappearing officials in China?
Fun, no? It's apparently, the most charitable explanation is once the emperor has vanquished all his enemies, he starts looking for enemies who don't exist.
Okay.
And I think that's what happened to the head of the strategic forces, to the defense minister and the foreign minister. And notice 3 key crucial ministries.
Yes.
Defense, nuclear forces and
foreign ministry. Right. So will this not cause instability and problems for Xi Jinping?
I'm hoping it will. See, he doesn't think he will.
Okay.
So, he doesn't think he will. It will. That he's actually making it more secure.
Okay.
But imagine all the loyalists who were loyal to Xi Jinping, who survived all his other Guanxi purges. He's a princeling, right? He's the princeling Guanxi.
Yes.
All the other Guanxis have been eliminated for all effects and purposes. And Guanxis, for our viewers, is the factions within the Chinese Communist Party. The princelings are the sons of communist royalty, which is what Xi Jinping belongs to. And even now, he's gone after all of them. He's also eliminated all his rivals within the princeling Guanxi. Then, he's now going after his own supporters.
Okay.
Now, if you are a Xi Jinping supporter, you're thinking, bhai, ye mere liye khuda tha. Maine iske liye har cheez kiya. Now you're coming after me. What do you think his response is going to be? I think they're going to conspire, because this isn't like Stalin's Russia. You still have, there are still much more checks and balances on Xi Jinping than there were on Stalin or Mao Zedong.
Yes.
So I think it will actually embolden revolts and rebellions against. Let me put it this way: Xi Jinping's end will not be a peaceful one.
Right.
And the longer he continues in office, the more hopes and dreams that are. There is nothing worse than an ambitious man who felt he was within 10 years of presidency denied his presidency. So, once you cut off social mobility, you create social stress, which is what is happening in the party. It's going to be good. Maza aayega.
Maza aayega. Yeah, good.
It's like, the Pakistan army. Every time a chief of staff extends his own tenure, have you noticed a few generals get sacked?
Yes, that's right.
Not just superseded, but sacked.
Yes.
Because they're plotting. That's what's going to happen out here. Now, will they succeed? Will they fail? I don't know.
Do you see a potential successor to Xi Jinping somewhere on the horizon?
Xi Jinping won't allow it.
Okay. Where does the real power lie in the Chinese Communist Party, apart from Xi Jinping? Obviously, he needs the support of others, right?
Look, he's pretty much castrated everyone in the thing. I am not seeing a power center outside of him.
Okay.
If there was even a nominal power center at any point of time, it is now too scared.
Okay.
So I don't see any power center outside of him.
Wow, that's bad, huh?
That's bad. Unless they all get together, in which case it will mostly be the army and the Politburo.
Right.
But I think it's still a long way off.
Okay. Do you see China as a nation that's still rising, or is it now stagnating? And
it's now finished.
It's finished? Why do you say that?
Before COVID, its per capita income was still about $10,000. Abhi bhi $10,000 par hi atka hua hai. All those massive rises in per capita income that we saw, they've pretty much evened out. Their manufacturing is strong, but what their manufacturing adds in terms of revenue, their bad investments in infrastructure lose. Construction, trains, all of that, it's destroying it. Bad investments in BRI.
Yes.
The construction sector itself is something like $3 trillion in unrecoverable. The train is $1 trillion unrecoverable. $4 trillion is unrecoverable, boss.
Okay.
It's a write-off. God knows how many other bad loans they're sitting on that we don't know about. So a lot of the revenue of manufacturing, and very successful, good manufacturing, I might add, is going to offset all the failures of state investment.
Okay.
Where is the money to plow back in profit?
None.
There's none. There is none. So, it's very strange because Deng Xiaoping never wanted to repeat the mistakes of the USSR. And yet, and this is why we should be eternally thankful to the editor of, what is that Chinese newspaper?
The Global Times.
Global Times. Who was a Tiananmen Square protester who suddenly turned into Xi Jinping's biggest fellator. He screwed China over then, he's screwing China over now. And I'll tell you why. I think the editor of Global Times is India's biggest friend. He might also be a raw agent. I'll tell you why. Before Tiananmen Square, think of the editor of Global Times as the Gurupatwant Singh Pannu of China. Okay, and I'll tell you why. Till Tiananmen Square, Deng Xiaoping was creating a genuine middle class in China. He was creating genuine private demand. But he realized that on the backs of an empowered middle class comes political change, which is what Tiananmen Square was about, which is what the rise of the BJP is about. Remember, it was the middle class that Narasimha Rao created that ultimately decimated the Congress. Deng Xiaoping saw that happening. So he switched it back to a system where the middle class wasn't really a middle class. It would depend on handouts from the state. You would not be placing the orders. You would be asking the state to place the orders, and it is all public demand. And therefore, you are in a perpetual patronage system with the state. It was Tiananmen Square that changed Deng Xiaoping's mind on creating a genuinely free market.
Okay.
Which is one of the roots of this problem, that the government decided that all socially upwardly mobile people have to be kept dependent on the state, which is why Chinese foreign students are the biggest supporters of the state. Second is the 2008 subprime mortgage crisis.
Yes.
Which, like all good governments, requires extra government spending, which is what China did. But then they got addicted to it, because spending is very, very addictive. When you spend your way out of a crisis, you think it is your free ticket to everything, which is why the construction industry goes berserk, the train and infrastructure industry goes berserk, and you're seeing the quality of roads, they're collapsing and shit like that, right? They're not paying attention. All these fancy airports coming up in places which can't sustain them are going berserk. You have ghost airports in China, you have ghost buildings in China.
Yes.
You have ghost buildings in Beijing. People don't realize this.
Okay, in Beijing itself.
Beijing, the urban suburbs after 7 p.m. there is no light on.
Okay.
And you think they go to sleep at 7 p.m. But you look at the car parks, they're all vacant. There's maybe 2-3 car parks in a building society of 1,000 flats.
Okay.
There's something happening there which I can't put my finger on it, but I've seen it. And it's the third is Xi Jinping coming, where he's closed off all the external inputs that he could have got to course correct. All my Chinese friends who used to be great propagandists in public, when we sat down in private for a champagne or single malt or whatever, would be vicious about their government.
Okay.
I can't have those conversations anymore.
Okay.
Even in private, they're shit scared because they don't know what is bugged, who is listening, what is watching. There is no criticism allowed. And so, the great genius of a democracy is two things. One is the pressure cooker. It is the pressure valve in the pressure cooker that prevents it from exploding. The second thing is it acts as an early warning device. You can see discontent brewing. He can't see discontent brewing. So there's nobody there to tell him that all these things are going catastrophically wrong. And who supports him and encourages him to do all this shit? The editor of the Global Mail, who also did Tiananmen Square. So I don't know if you make a shorts out of this or whatever, but if any of you, when you're watching this, if you could please post this tribute to the editor of Global Times. We thank you for being such a devoted raw agent, for you to have set China on the path of doom in 1989, and for you to have reinforced China going on the path of doom in under dear leader Xi Jinping. Thank you, comrade.
We'll make sure that goes out as a clip.
Yeah, and please tag him in it as well.
I will. I'll make sure to do that. What do you think makes a nation's TFR, total fertility rate, fall? Because in China, it's gone up. It's around 1.1 or something TFR right now.
See, China tells you everything that you should not do, because that is a very artificial, very, very dangerous way of controlling. TFRs don't need controlling. ultimately they level out by themselves. See, there are two things that control it. One is the fertility rate, which is nutrition based. The second is the infant mortality rate, which is also healthcare based. It is also nutrition based, but it's also healthcare based. You had an increase in healthcare because the amount of money you were spending on grain could now be diverted towards something else, say rural hospitals and vaccination programs and things like that. Remember, it was in the 70s, the moment we started getting more self-reliant on local grain. We didn't have to import. That we started spending on healthcare, medicines, polio, vaccination, and all of that. So you've reduced infant mortality. You have increased availability to food. Your birth rates skyrocket.
Right.
In pre-industrial times, what used to happen, and we are a pre-industrial country, during times of plenty, it would skyrocket. And then natural climate change, because you've used up too much of the land and eroded it, there would be famine would either set in due to natural reasons or because of soil quality deterioration reasons. The population would fall. Here what has happened is the cost of having a child has gone up. You have to educate the child. You have to look after the child's health. Pehle log sochte nahi. Because a person who has not known where their next meal will come from, or if their child will drop dead, will have 7 boys in the hope, and they will kill off 7 girls to have those 7 boys in the hope that at least 2 sons survive to look after me when I'm old. Once you know that your children are not going to die, and once you know food is coming, you then start focusing on, मैंने इसका स्कूल फीस भरना है यार, मैंने इसका यूनिफॉर्म खरीदना है, I have to send him to college, कॉलेज में क्या करेगा, this, that, whatever, and then 7 kids become a curse. Okay, they become a curse because you have to spend 7 times. पहले 5 मर जाते, so you only have to spend 2. अब सातों के साथ live. So all of this has helped, and it's that natural realization that comes about that automatically levels it out. We are now at, I think nationally we're at 1.6 or something. 2 is the replacement rate.
2.1 is replacement.
Yeah. Which is good because then we reach our peak and then we start coming down. I personally believe that India will become a developed country somewhere in the midst in 2070 onwards. When our inverted pyramid gets particularly acute. Because that is when there will be societal pressure on you to go in for value-added manufacturing, high value-added manufacturing.
Okay.
I think that is when the changes will happen, but I think whatever society will be like in about 2055 onwards, I wouldn't want to be alive to see it.
What do you think will happen?
I don't know. That's why I don't want to be alive to see it.
Okay.
Because all my prognostications have been negative. Because remember, an inverted population pyramid is very dangerous for dependency if you're not a high-income country.
Okay.
It's bad even in a high-income country. But if you're not a high-income country, it becomes even more dangerous. Because 2 parents then have to depend on 1 child. How do you do that? 1 child who's not earning that much, how do you do that? The social tension that will produce, what do you do with that? And we're coming to the end of the manufacturing revolution. It's all going to be additive manufacturing. How do you move there? Because see, this is, we are moving arithmetically. The West is moving geometrically. So, the distance to catch up is that much more. Before, say in the 1920s, if we wanted to become an industrialized state, it was as simple as doing what the USSR did, which is set up coal mines and coal, steel, and manufacture guns. Initially, your guns will be shit, your tanks will be shit, your engines will be shit, but ultimately you will get hold of it and work.
Yes.
Today, that science has become so complex.
Yes, it has.
You have to master, for one phone, you have to master 1,000 different fields of physics.
Yes.
It isn't possible as a national effort anymore. So I worry. I honestly worry. Sometimes it goes down such deep holes that, I just cut off that line of thought and move away from it.
So do you think India is not in a position to catch up with the West anymore?
No. No.
Okay.
I don't.
Okay.
I don't. I think that, let me caveat that. The West has, if it follows its current natural trajectory, no. But we are in a position to catch up with the West if all this wokeism and things like that catch up. Because look, I think the more wokeism controls America and Europe, they're going to go on a downward trajectory.
They will.
And had the growth graph been like this, had the growth graph been like this, then India would be like this. It would be getting worse and worse. But their growth graph is like this, so we will be like this. Yeah.
Yeah, so we are witnessing this rise of wokeism in the West, and they are in the US, obviously, and they are exporting it to Europe, maybe to India as well. What do you make of all this? I mean, what is wrong with the society? All this gender stuff and whatnot.
You know, when you run out of real issues, you concoct issues. You know, there's a saying in a marriage. I've never been married, so I can't tell you. When the sex is bad, it becomes an issue. When the sex is good, other things become an issue. It's like that. You have everything. You've solved everything. You now need issues to create identity politics-based politics on. And you only do that by generating rage. You know, scientifically speaking, equality of outcome is impossible.
It's impossible.
Okay. And yet we are led to believe it can be done. Even so-called scientists like Neil deGrasse Tyson, you saw that video
I've seen
of him
that,
going absolutely...
On
all
the
this
PBD
scientific
podcast.
logic goes out of this thing. What do you do? What do you do? And, you know, my real worry in all of this is the thought policing that happens.
Yes.
Because the Industrial Revolution became possible because of a complete exhaustion with religion.
Yes.
And religious wars, where everything was then open to questioning. When you start imposing thought controls, again, you prevent growth and creativity, which is what I think Western companies want. We saw what happened to Nokia. They don't want that to happen to them. So wokeism is a fantastic way of preventing innovation from happening. Google ke, you know, in Tamil, we've got a lovely word, Mayir Pidingi. It is a fellow who's so useless that his only employment can be that of a professional pubic hair plucker.
Okay.
99.999% of Google staff are Mayir Pidingis.
Okay.
What is a new product Google has come up in the last 10 years, batao?
Not sure what it is.
Nothing. Google Earth and all of this came up in 2004, 2006, Google Maps. Pichle 10 saal mein, there is not a single new product that Google has come up with. Why do they have all these huge offices and things like that? It's all a valuation game. People who work inside Google have the most miserable lives. They get paid almost 1 crore a year, so they're not complaining about the thing. But their entire life is stressed out because they have all these criteria to meet, which are intangible criteria that can be judged in any way.
I see.
Where you have to constantly be worried about tripping over each other's toes. Because you never know why you'll get written up for sexual harassment or offending somebody's religious feelings, or just plain offending somebody, which is a sackable offense apparently. And it's all done for valuation. I think what the government needs to crack down on is these valuation game fly-by-nights. These valuation, and there's a lot of these startups that are valuation game fly-by-nights. I think we need regulations to deal with those kind of companies. In India.
In India. Right.
In America, I don't give a shit if they exist or if they collapse. You know, the debt to equity ratio is obscene. It's something like 13:1. Who maintains a debt to equity ratio like that? That's an unsustainable debt. Anybody knows that's an unsustainable debt, right? At some point, something's got to give.
Yes.
The problem is, I would have suspected when this gives, wokeism will end. But the problem is, wokeism has acquired such institutional control.
It has.
And what we've seen with a lot of these Islamic republics is that the solution to not true Islam is even more Islam. It's not secularism. Like that, the same way to it's not true socialism is even more socialism.
Yes, that's right.
And that's what you're going to see.
Uh-huh.
I'm scared, which is why I'm very happy that I'm 45 and given my paunch and I've given up my smoking, alas. So I was hoping that given my smoking and my paunch, I'd die at around 65 and not have to see the world that comes after it. Because honestly, I'm very scared of what happens in India and the world 20 years down the line. It's probably not a place I want to go to.
Right. What do you make of the US, the Biden regime opening the southern border, just allowing anyone through now?
Ab kya karoge? What do you do? I mean, how do you even explain this?
I don't understand.
Because they basically want people to come in that will shift the vote in this thing.
That's what it is.
Because they know that middle America is proportionately more than them. They want to balance that out through the immigrant vote. You've decided to commit suicide, fine, so be it. I mean, look, you can't save if a guy has decided to commit suicide, you can't save it from suicide.
You can't. Yeah.
You can't. I think, it's the order where, remember, it wasn't the Battle of Tannenberg that destroyed Russia in the First World War. Everybody, all our history books used to tell us that one Battle of Tannenberg, which Hindenburg and Ludendorff presided over the destruction of the Russian army, was the end of Russia from the war, and Russia was effectively knocked out of the war after that. Bullshit. The Brusilov offensive came after that. What destroyed Russian cohesion was that provisional government issuing that Prikaz 1, that first order, which said officers cannot talk down to officers can't order this thing around. It destroyed morale within the army. And then, of course, the Kaiser sent Lenin over to destroy it even more. And people don't realize this, that all communists, wherever they are, work for a foreign government. Never forget that. Mao Zedong was essentially a Japanese stooge by default. He did not fight the Japanese. No matter what the Chinese Communist Party tells you, please don't believe that. He sat out the Second World War polishing his guns. It was the Kuomintang that fought the Japanese and did all the dying, which is why after the Japanese had killed off most of the Kuomintang, Mao Zedong found it so easy to take over China. And Lenin was a German bloody agent. Why don't we ever talk about this? He was sent by the Kaiser to destroy Russia in a sealed train because he was so dangerous that they didn't want him getting out of the train anywhere through German territory. This kind of breakdown is inevitable. अब देखते हैं क्या होता है.
Right. So we have the US presidential race coming up. Who do you think? I mean, who are you watching? Who are you favoring? What do you make of Ramaswamy? I mean, that's what
I love Ramaswamy. He makes a lot of sense. But he's not going to get it.
He won't get it.
I think he's aiming for the vice presidential
number
nomination.
2.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which I think, because of his full-throated defense of Trump, he might get.
He might.
I'm sure Trump is going to. I think it's almost given that Trump is going to get the nomination, given how far ahead he is in all the polls.
Yes.
But I think Trump is going to lose the election. There's going to be massive election violence after that. I think the systemic collapse of America anyway is going to happen much before any systemic collapse happens of India or China. And I think with America, I think when 2024, I think the real inflection date would be around 2030s.
Okay.
I think you'll see look, no analogy is ever perfect, right? But I'm going to give you an analogy nevertheless. The peak of the Assyrian Empire was just 40 years before the destruction of the Assyrian Empire. The peak of the Maurya Empire was just 20-30 years before its destruction. At the hands of the same Kalingas. We never talk about how the Kalingas came and burnt Patliputra to the ground. Just 20 years after Ashoka. Was it 20 or 40 years? Nineveh was burnt to the ground and nobody even knows where Nineveh is today, 40 years after the absolute peak of the Assyrian Empire. I think that systems collapse of America is going to be very rapid in a way nobody expects it to be. And that's where America is heading towards.
And why are they doing this? That's the question.
I don't know.
Whoever runs the country is hastening the nation in that direction.
I agree, but
Yes.
I don't know why they're doing it. I don't know why they're doing it. So there was a... Tucker Carlson gave the speech yesterday. I got to buy the book about Peter Wrangel's book. Peter Wrangel was a Tsarist general.
Uh-huh.
And he says in that book, I'm quoting Tucker Carlson because I haven't read the book, that he was on the streets of St. Petersburg seeing people being shot and butchered by soldiers on the street, because by this time Prikaz I had already come into effect and the army was in effective mutiny. Well, there were mass abandonment and they'd gone berserk. And he goes into a theater and people are just sitting there watching the movie as if nothing's happening outside. He can see loot, arson, rape, murder happening on the streets of St. Petersburg. But the people inside the theater are completely unconcerned. Then he goes to meet the Tsar. And half the women in the Tsar's household are wearing little red badges in support of the Bolsheviks.
Okay.
There's a certain surrealness when you're about to die, I guess, when you don't realize. It's... I mean, with the benefit of hindsight, we know by, 1919, Britain's colonies had stopped being profitable. And yet that colonial hangover in Churchill continued for another 20 years.
Yes.
What explains that? I don't know. Did Russia realize, did the USSR realize it was going to collapse in 1 year's time? I think not. Did the East Germans realize that they were going to collapse in 1 year's time? I think not. Tell me one country that has collapsed that would have thought it was going to collapse.
Can't think of one, yeah.
Do Pakistanis today realize what's happening to their country?
Yes.
Did the Afghans know what was going to happen to their country? Do you think any of the people that, with the benefit of hindsight, do you think any of these Mujahideen would have taken up arms against the Soviet installed Afghan government had they known how things would turn out? No. Did the Shah 1 year before he fell knew he was going to fall?
They would have had no idea. Yeah,
I think it's just that.
What do you make of Pakistan? Do you think it's on the verge of collapse?
I'm actually more optimistic about Pakistan than I am about America.
Okay.
I'll tell you why. When you're such a heavily industrialized, interdependent society and you have a system of systems collapse, you fall that much and it's impossible to readjust. But when Pakistan is just here and you fall that much,
Not much.
the societal, it's already an extremely violent society. It's already an extremely feudal society. State girna hai, ki fark penda hai. It's like state tha, state na tha, hamara ki.
Hamara ki. Yeah. What do you think will happen next 5 years in Pakistan?
Impossible to say. No? I just see...
You think the army will hang on?
Oh, the army will hang on for sure. See, the army isn't going anywhere because सब आर्मी के बच्चे थोड़े आर्मी में भर्ती होते हैं. All the army के बच्चे go join to Harvard, Princeton, Yale, all that shit. And they have houses in Dubai and London and Boston and New York or whatever. What I see is massively increased societal violence. What I see is massively increased attacks on Pakistani soldiers. Remember, the soldiers aren't the commissioned officers who ultimately get to be brigadiers and generals and all of that, and get into the Fauji Foundation system of institutionalized extortion of a country. Just that. But I think the feudal hold is so powerful And the redundancy mechanism through Dubai, Washington, and London is so powerful that it might be next to impossible to dislodge them.
Okay.
Might be.
And what do you make of the situation in Afghanistan?
Fantastic. I love the Taliban. See, they're our friends.
Okay.
See, we should be multicultural and we should accept that there's cultural relativity in their treatment of women and minorities.
Yes.
Okay. We need to accept that Afghanistan needs to be governed to its own unique genius and to the unique genius of its people, and Taliban represents the ethos of that unique genius. And as long as they continue to cause trouble along the Pakistan border and in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, I fundamentally believe that the Taliban are a shining star in terms of how third world developing countries can balance human rights with traditional values.
Right. Do you think it's safe to visit Afghanistan?
Totally.
Yeah?
Of course, it was safe to visit Afghanistan when I went.
How do you get in?
वो ना टूरिस्ट को नहीं मारते हैं. एम्बेसी जाओ, वीजा दे देंगे.
Okay, that's it.
That's it.
So they have an embassy that's functional, right now?
Well, you're just out of thing because yesterday the notification came out that it became unfunctional.
Okay, what happened?
I don't know. The embassy put out a statement saying because our government isn't subsidizing them, they're not able to function.
Okay.
And apparently everybody sought asylum and left. There are no officials around.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can go to Dubai and apply for a visa in Dubai, and you can fly from Dubai to Kabul.
Okay, so there are no flights from here?
No. There are no operational flights from here as far as I checked. I haven't checked, maybe check.
Okay.
When I went, there was that air ban. So instead of the normal 1.5 hour flight to Kabul, you had to go all the way south into the Bay of Bengal, into the Arabian Sea, then over Iran, and then into, so it was a 5 hour flight.
Okay. You dodged Pakistan.
We had to dodge Pakistan, no? Because उस time ये हुआ था ना, there was we had banned each other's flights from flying over.
I do remember that, yes.
Yeah. I think it was post Balakot or whatever, possibly. But go there. It's a fantastic country to visit.
I would love to go there.
You should. It's I think the only thing I couldn't deal with anymore, and I'm a solid carnivore boss, at least I used to be a solid carnivore, the meat was too much even for me.
Okay. Yeah.
And all Afghans, every time one of my video goes up, they say, oh, Afghans eat lots of vegetables at home.
Okay.
I'm like, मेरे को दिखा तू कहाँ खाता. I've been into so many Afghan homes. एक footy, यार, they don't even bloody put parsley on their food.
Okay.
धनिया नहीं डालते हैं कि to garnish something.
Okay.
क्या सब्जी खाते हो तुम लोग?
Only meat.
Only meat. Nobody's bloody, and like, okay. Now, it's because of the guest culture that when you come, you are only given meat. If you go as a normal person, I went to my guide's house some 5-6 times. Every time meat.
Okay.
What are you eating today? I used to ask him. Today maybe one day they would have had potato.
Potatoes, okay. That's vegetables.
That's vegetables.
Okay.
But this is how India is also becoming. Have you noticed the number of people that I know in India whose idea of vegetable is just potato and paneer?
Okay.
Who hate every other kind of vegetable.
Really? Wow.
I'm like, you're vegetarian. How do you hate vegetables? There isn't a single vegetable I don't like. Not one.
Good. Yeah.
But I know so many vegetarians who can't eat any vegetable other than paneer and potato.
So paneer is technically not vegetable at all.
It's allegedly vegetarian.
Oh, okay.
Of course, nobody wants to look at the dairy industry consequences for cows. Dairy industry probably kills more cows than the meat industry in India does. Because what do you think happens to all those male calves that are born? That's what shoes. And that's where for every 10 packets of butter that you consume, one calf has been killed in order for that surplus to come to you. Of course, India is a good news society. We don't want to hear about any of this crap. And then they'll say, oh, because you eat it, therefore you're trying to justify it. Yeah, which I am. But tum bhi khud apna thoda introspection karo, bhai.
Yeah, right.
But it's a fun place. And I'll tell you why. Europe and America, you know what to expect.
Yes, you do.
It's everything kind of works. Everything's functional. There's no sociologically weird bits out there. This is such a dysfunctional society. If you're interested in human beings, it's like Disneyland. Because I know this sounds really weird, to consider human tragedy. But, when you study anthropology, you're looking at actual anthropological change happen in front of you that you've only read about in books. So it's fascinating seeing it happen. The geography of the place is so fascinating. It's just stunning. Like any place you go to Afghanistan, like when we are driving from Kabul to the Panjshir Valley, it's stunning. The plains are stunning, the mountains are stunning, Panjshir itself is stunning. And each valley in the Panjshir is different from the previous valley. One will be a complete lunar valley, one will be a complete Swiss meadow valley. So it's, you go to Kandahar, it's totally different from, say, Herat. And so on and so forth, right? I think of all my sociological experiences, the more repressed and war-torn the country, the more interesting and fascinating I've found it. North Korea and Afghanistan, I will always, without exception, be my two top destinations that I feel I have been blessed to visit.
I would love to visit Afghanistan. Is it safe for a Hindu to go there?
Totally,
yeah. How is Iran?
Iran's fun. Iran's great fun. Again, you get bored with the food. The problem is in Iran, they talk up the food. In Afghanistan, they don't talk up the food. But when you go to Iran, in India, we've got this over-bloated sense of our own self. Iran mein jao, we can help the Iranians build the Zerenj-Dalaram highway from Chabahar. You go there, look at the quality of the roads, boss. They're better than anything you have in India. Except maybe Nitin Gadkari's new Delhi-Jaipur highway, which is technically the Delhi-Mumbai highway. तुम जाके उनको क्या सिखाओगे? You go to Persepolis, you have nothing in that scale in India. And it was built about a good 1,000-2,000 years before anything in India. Or at least 300-400 years before. Patliputra ka kya ruins hai? Abhi print mein I saw Disha Ahluwalia wrote a piece, lovely piece on how we're only now are we getting to the first excavated ruins of Patliputra.
I've always wondered what happened to the ruins of Patliputra. I mean, why aren't we looking into that?
So get Disha Ahluwalia and talk to her about it. She mostly specializes on Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro because she's a proper archaeologist. She spends time under mosquito nets in the middle of a desert digging things up.
Nice.
But where are our great archaeological ruins of a whole city, except say this one, Vijayanagar? Hai kahan? Tum batao. And even in Vijayanagar, where are the ordinary dwellings? There is good public monumentage, but that's about it. Here you will see a lot of, where is Patliputra? In Iran, you will see a lot of public monumentage. Caravanserais built for caravans from the Achaemenid era. So about 300-400 BC. Of course, you'll see a lot more public infrastructure built by empires. In India, have you noticed, you will see little to no public infrastructure built for the people by anyone. Caravanserais, anything like that, you just won't find. In roads, yes. Ashoka built roads, and then Sher Shah Suri built roads, and then Bajpai built roads. Those were the only, and now Nitin Gadkari is building roads. In Persia, you will see all of that. You get a sense of empire when you go to three cities. Istanbul, Rome, and Persepolis. You understand there was wealth here to an unprecedented scale. Also Egypt. Those are empires. We don't have that kind of, maybe you get it if you go to Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, but those are in Pakistan, so I haven't been.
Yeah, right.
I suspect you would. According to Disha, those are the only two cities you would probably get that feeling of great civic wealth.
Okay. Right. Okay, moving to Ukraine, what do you make of the situation right now? Who's winning, who's losing? It's just a stalemate.
It's
right?
frozen.
It's frozen. It's a frozen conflict.
It's a frozen conflict. It's an intractable frozen conflict. Ultimately, it's got to give. And I can bet you that, with Russian low quality, lots of quantity, they have much more staying power than Ukraine with a conscript force, with very high quality handovers which they have no idea how to use, with very low quality training troops. Kya karoge?
So what direction do you see this going in?
I don't see this resolving in it. Ultimately, Russia will win. But I don't know when that ultimately is. Unless there's some wild card that comes in somewhere.
Do you see Poland getting into the conflict?
No NATO country is ever going to get directly involved in this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Totally proxy.
Totally proxy.
Okay.
It is only going to be proxy. They will fight to the last Ukrainian. They won't expend a single Pole.
Let's say Ukraine falls. What happens then?
It falls. That's it.
That's it. It's over.
You have a much more. No, it's the beginning of something new.
It's the beginning of something else. Yes.
Which is what? Let's then analyze what happens to the neighborhood around Russia. You have an ultra-liberal woke Western Europe and an increasingly more conservative Eastern Europe. But then you have the Russian threat. I think you'll see a new Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact where woke Europe, woke Western Europe, will see a bigger enemy in anti-woke Eastern Europe. They already consider Viktor Orban to be Putin's henchman.
Okay.
The Poles, because they're chronically anti-Russia, they don't. But there's lots of EU sanctions being applied on Poland for all kinds of social conservatism crimes.
Okay.
I do think that new fissure will be how much of a threat Russia is to Eastern Europe. I'm waiting for the East-West Europe schism to decide the future with Russia.
What do you make of the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh? The Azeris have taken it over essentially, or if they're...
Nagorno-Karabakh is finished.
It's finished,
Let's be clear
right?
about it.
Yeah.
Let's be clear about it.
Does Armenia have a future?
Not under Nikol Pashinyan, I can tell you that. Let's look at where this starts. Okay. You saw I tweeted out that Russian MEA statement, right? The very harsh statement that they put out about Pashinyan and the Armenians, essentially blaming the Armenians for everything. First, let's understand why Nikol Pashinyan is anti-Russia. He is anti-Russia, let's be clear.
Yes, he is.
Russia is right in that he came through a colored revolution, because what he did was a colored revolution. He squatted on parliament and made it dysfunctional and then demanded an early election and then got elected. Okay. Why? He was very close to Levon Ter-Petrosyan, who was the founding president of Armenia.
Okay.
And he remembers the very mischievous role that Russia played in the War of Independence when Nagorno-Karabakh was captured. Nagorno-Karabakh and the surrounding territories. Remember, they wanted a land corridor. If you go and look at a map of Armenia and Azerbaijan, you will see that Azerbaijan has an exclave called Nakhchivan, which is separated from it by Armenia.
Yes.
And there is Nagorno-Karabakh, which is technically part of Azerbaijan, which the Armenians believe should have been part of their territory.
Yes.
And so they created a contiguous land border to it. That is what the fighting from 89 to 94 was all about. Now, what did Russia do with Donetsk and Lugansk? It annexed them. It annexed Crimea.
Yes.
Why didn't they allow Armenia? Armenia wanted to annex those areas.
Yes.
For the last 35-40 years, Russia has refused to let them annex. Why? To create a frozen conflict, which they could activate or deactivate at any given point of time. Then in 2020, when Azerbaijan decided to act, what was the Russian blame game on the Armenians? But you didn't annex it. So our CSTO treaty obligations are only to Armenia proper. They are not to this huge chunk of land that you haven't annexed. Who told you not to annex it? Well, the bloody Russians told you not to annex it.
Yes.
Because they threatened to cut off all arms supply and things like that if you didn't annex it, right? Now, Armenia has no natural resources. It's a landlocked country.
Yes, it is.
Azerbaijan is exporting gas through Georgia and Iran, and I think through Iran, but mostly through Georgia. Anyway. So what do you have now left? Azerbaijan that was growing insanely rich, Armenia that was stuck. You're landlocked, so investment, manufacturing, kya karoge? You're at the mercy of Turkey.
Yes.
You have three neighbors, Iran, Azerbaijan, Georgia and Turkey. What are your options realistically? Iran isn't a viable option because it's under sanctions. Azerbaijan is your sworn enemy. Georgia is going the western way, but you are not land contiguous to Georgia, and Turkey hates you. They killed off most of you.
Yes.
So you understand where Nikol Pashinyan's hatred of Russia is now coming about. Number one. Number two, that doesn't excuse what Nikol Pashinyan did. What did you think you were going to do? He actively wanted better relations with Turkey. Did you think Turkey was just going to throw Azerbaijan under the truck because you express some need to get closer? It wasn't going to happen.
Yes.
But 2020 kind of cemented all of that. And 2020 wouldn't have happened had Russia not given the go-ahead to Azerbaijan.
Yes.
Russia definitely did give a go-ahead to Azerbaijan, mostly to screw Pashinyan over, who they viewed as a product of a colored revolution, an American stooge essentially. But what does it say about Armenians voting for a schmuck like Pashinyan? Believing that after the loss of 2020, boss, how did this fellow still stick around?
Yeah, that's...
How come there wasn't a colored revolution to get rid of him?
Yes, right.
A lot of this is to blame, because the immediate blame goes on Pashinyan. We tend to forget how much Russia is also responsible for this situation, how complicit Russia in this situation. What do you do? So Russia is a very, very unreliable ally. I want you to read Gromyko and I want you to read Kissinger. Kissinger you would have already read, but you would have read Gromyko. Everything you've read in Kissinger is about, he contextualized everything to the larger warfare, ideological warfare with the USSR, but everything was mostly about the interests of the ally involved in the war. 90% was seeing to it that the allies' war goals were met or to prevent the worst happening to the ally, and 10% was American goals. The USSR was always 90% our interest, 10% your interest.
Okay.
And you've seen that out here, haven't you?
Right.
What do you do?
Yes.
So if you think Russia's a reliable ally, congratulations to you.
Right. Do you think Turkey is rising now? Because they have this Pan-Turan corridor. Kazakhstan recently announced that they are going to participate in the sanctions regime against Russia. So all the Turkic nations seem to be on
they're not participating in any sanctions regime against Russia. They're not.
Okay.
Especially Kazakhstan, because they know what will happen to them. You know, the whole reason they moved the capital from Almaty to Astana. Astana is a shithole. It's much colder than Almaty as well.
Okay.
They moved it there because that is where most of the Russian population is. No, there's a big Russian population in Kazakhstan.
Okay.
They don't want what happened to Ukraine to happen to Kazakhstan.
Okay.
They won't see. There are certain things that the 5 Central Asian stans will never do. Kabhi bhi nahi karenge. They're not. They don't have cocaine addicts as presidents. But Turkey, no. Turkey will not rise. You will see lots of these heave-hos, but nothing. Turkey, why do we not talk about the fact that Turkey is in deep economic shit? Because of that same infrastructure construction model that China and Lebanon followed.
Okay.
You know, the Chinese model that we spoke about earlier on is very similar to the It started off as the Lebanon model. And the Lebanon model was this crook called Rafiq Hariri.
Hariri.
Absolute piece of shit. He decided he was going to do, after the civil war ended, I will rebuild Lebanon. The only thing is, I will have my company, Saudi Auger, will have a monopoly on building. और कोई build नहीं कर सकता इस देश में. So the Lebanese national debt is the Hariri personal family fortune.
Okay.
ठीक है? He bankrupted Lebanon to make himself a billionaire.
Okay.
And the Lebanese didn't know better at that time. They're like, oh my God, he's rebuilding Tyre, he's rebuilding Sidon, he's rebuilding Beirut. Thank you so much, Paris of the East, blah, blah, bullshit. They all voted for him. But like we discussed, infrastructure by itself in a third world country or a devastated country does not produce growth. When you have severe social strife like Lebanon does, when you have huge regulatory issues, massive corruption as Lebanon does, you can't have growth. And that is the root of today's Lebanese economic collapse. People have forgotten about the Lebanese economic collapse. They still remember the explosion that happened in Beirut harbor, but they don't forget at around about the same time, Lebanon is essentially bankrupt. China is on its way to bankruptcy, like we discussed earlier on. Turkey did the same thing. They did construction. But bhai, और कुछ तो होना चाहिए ना? Construction for what? People need to be able to afford those buildings to move into.
Yes.
Na? What do you do?
Okay. So Turkey is not doing great.
Turkey is not doing great. Turkey is not going to be doing great because, and a lot of it has to do with Erdogan. Erdogan again doesn't listen to advice. He sacked his own son-in-law as finance minister.
Okay, he did.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's nepotistic and he doesn't listen.
I see.
What do? You remember when he first came to power, his was a zero confrontation policy. Everybody was happy with Turkey. Today, tell me one person who's happy with
No
Turkey.
one is.
There's nobody he hasn't pissed off.
Yes.
That is where he is. When you have that much ill will up against you, nobody likes you, nobody is willing to do you any favors. You are in NATO's bad books, you're no longer getting the F-35.
Yes.
You are no longer, you may get the S-400, and we've seen how spectacularly the S-400 performs both in Armenia and in Ukraine. And I'm being sarcastic just in case you didn't get the sarcasm. What do? So, best of luck to Erdogan. I'm happy that Erdogan's the president of Turkey.
France seems to be losing ground in Africa. There are these coups in the Sahel region, Niger and other places. What do you make of that? Who will gain from this?
Look, temporary setback, I think. Ultimately, what happens is there'll be a counter coup. France will bide its time, they'll wait, and then there'll be a counter coup.
There was an attempted counter coup just a couple of days ago, and it failed.
It failed,
yes.
But then one will succeed.
Okay.
You see, you just have to reduce your country to enough poverty for the counter coup to succeed.
Okay.
Abhi wo enthusiasm for the coup hai, that this is going to be different. See, I always say this, don't place your hopes on individuals. Place your hopes on institutions. Counter coup hoga and France will regain ground.
Okay.
And remember, it is the Organization of African Unity that is rallied up against all these coups, because it's now become a coup belt.
Yes.
And Nigeria is the one taking the lead on it because the Nigerian president is shit scared that he's going to be the next target.
Okay.
And he's getting quite militarily involved in there as well. They're already military, at least on Saturn, we can see there's lots of, it's not a formal military invasion, but there's lots of deliberate skirmishing. Well, we suspect skirmishing. You can't tell a skirmish, but unless things get destroyed. But there are drive-ins and things happening by the Nigerian military.
Is it Nigeria itself or is it ECOWAS as a whole?
It's look, ECOWAS is Nigeria.
It's Nigeria. Okay.
It's Nigeria.
Okay. Lastly, I want to ask you about BRICS expansion. BRICS has expanded. 6 new nations are part of BRICS. How does it change the world, so to say? What difference does it make?
It doesn't change the world. But remember what it shows. See, who are the important ones coming in there? Energy producers.
Yes, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and yeah.
So what you're showing is you, America, no longer control OPEC. Saudi Arabia and Iran are with us with an alternate formation, and we can also play havoc with you. They're not, and I think MBS has already shown he's not going to dance to Washington's tune.
Yes, yes, yeah.
So I'm quite happy with that. Not that BRICS was achieving anything even before. It was too diverse to achieve anything.
Yes.
But as a grouping of people who have seen enough of Western double talk, it was a good grouping. In terms of, one country has collapsed, South Africa, for all effects and purposes. And the other one is Brazil, which had a minor rise and now it's gone back down again. Embraer, its one great flagship, isn't doing well. Right?
Okay.
But just as a counter grouping, I think it's fun to see. And the fact that you've added all these energy resource intensive countries there, imagine it's not just energy, it's also diamonds and gold.
Yes.
Which are the two tangibles. The three tangibles. So diamonds, gold and energy, if you look at it, I think Russia is the second biggest producer of diamonds, but commercial diamonds after South Africa. And gold, I think Russia is one of the bigger producers, right? There's Canada, and I think Canada's somewhere there, but it's good. It's an interesting grouping. I have hopes for it.
What kind of hopes?
That will become more coherent. At the same time, the big question mark is always China.
Of course it is. Yes.
China is the one country that is so completely diverse in terms of its interest sets. How do you reconcile with it? Because even in terms of Russia, it is probably now looking at Russia as an extension of its empire.
Yes.
It's already started probably looking at Russia as northern China. It probably looks at India as far western China, the far western Chinese provinces. The new Xinjiang. Xinjiang technically means new province.
Yes.
Xinjiang will be renamed old Xinjiang. India will become new Xinjiang. That in their mind,
in their great dream, yeah.
South Africa is a colony. Brazil is a colony. That's the way they think. That's not the way the other four countries think, though. They have a very respectful attitude towards each other.
Yes.
So, like I said, I have hopes. I'm hoping that there'll be a break-off of a micro-grouping within the macro-grouping.
Okay.
Excluding China. But that seems tough because, like I told you the last time, in all our meetings of BRICS, we have seen the Russians start off with a different policy position. At the end of the 2 days of the academic meeting, the Russian position is indistinguishable from the Chinese position.
The Chinese position. That's an issue. Do you think de-dollarization can happen anytime?
Yes.
Yeah?
I think de-dollarization will depend on two things. Greater doubts about American currency, a greater systems collapse of America. I think one of the key factors will be the next election.
Yes.
Because irrespective of where it goes, I think there's going to be a lot of violence associated with the election, a lot of turmoil associated with the election. Combined with some other currency proving itself to be worthwhile. I don't think the yuan, given all of Chinese economic problems that we're talking about, is a worthwhile currency right now. I see currency feudalization.
Okay.
Where we go back to gold and diamonds as I see a recapitalization of gold, diamonds and platinum maybe.
Okay.
Possibly silver.
Right. So nations will go back to the gold standard or
I think
or basket of commodities.
I think so, because this debt, pegging your thing to debt.
Yeah.
Which idiot came up with this idea, yeah?
Unsustainable. Finally, last question. What do you think of Modi's prospects in 2024? Do you think he'll win?
He's winning.
Okay.
I think between Trudeau and G20, I think Trudeau was the Balakot of what Balakot was to 2019. Trudeau is to 2024.
Do you think there's any other Balakot coming up?
And remember, in Balakot, we didn't see the evidence.
We didn't see any evidence, yes.
We have not seen any evidence.
Thus far, yes.
But if the evidence comes out, Modi will win 2/3 majority. I guarantee.
Yes.
You tell me what Indian won't be thrilled?
Yes.
Ghus ke mara. Modi will get 350, 360. Well, I think 363 is the 2/3 majority, you know. I think he'll get 363 if the evidence comes out.
Right.
If not, I think he'll get about 315, 320 at least.
Okay. So you expect
At
a
the
complete
BJP
majority. Okay.
Yeah, easy.
All right.
Easy. I think the Congress is going to go down. Some people say it'll go up, possibly. But double digits mein rahega. Definitely not over 50.
Okay.
The 50s.
50s. All right. Let's see how it goes.
Let's see. I mean, this is just, this is my most frivolous prediction. All my election predictions are totally frivolous. You should remember this. I'm doing this just as, you know, naam ke vaste jaake jua khelna.
All right. Thank you so much for a wonderful conversation. Always fun to have you.
It's always fun to talk to a fellow Abhijit.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoying the conversation? Don't forget to like and subscribe. And please continue watching. Thank you.